Logic suggests there must be a first cause to everything. But is it really God? Most agnostics wouldn't have a problem with it being spaceless, timeless, or immaterial. I think the single biggest problem is whether it's personal, as asking whether it's omniscient, omnipotent, or good makes no sense if it's not personal in the first place. Welcome to the Seeker's Tavern. We can explore the nature of the first cause during this video by investigating the following questions. Is the first cause spatial, temporal, or material? Is it personal? And if it is he omniscient, omnipotent, and all-good, and therefore God? This tavern is a welcome place for all seekers of truth, so grab a pint and feel free to comment on any of the points I make. Is the first cause spatial, temporal, or material? This is an easy one. The answer is pretty much immediately obvious. From what we know, not only matter and energy, but also space and time themselves were created. Since there was no space, time, nor matter prior to creation, the first cause must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Is it personal? This is the big question and the necessary one to answer before we can even ask about whether he is omniscient, omnipotent, or good, since those qualities only make sense if it's personal to begin with. So what is a person? A person is an individual, meaning something indivisible, that has the abilities of consciousness and free will. Consciousness is the ability to perceive or know something internally, is the movement of an image of something towards the individual. Free will is the ability to cause one of many things to happen without being caused to do so by something else, is the movement of an image from within the individual towards something else. Those two abilities are the defining characteristics of being a person. If you have no consciousness, there is no person to speak of. Also, the choices that you make define what kind of a person you are. Every personality test examines how you would act in a specific scenario, and you have to pick one of many options. Subjective conscious experience and subjective decisions are what makes you you, the subject, the person. So does the first cause have free will? The first cause is something indivisible that has the power to cause independently. The first cause created the universe in a particular way, even though it theoretically could have done so differently. Therefore, the first cause fits the definition of free will perfectly. Even if you didn't believe that we have free will, then it is indisputable that at least the first cause must have free will. Does the first cause have consciousness? To start with, let me explain the concept of an image, as seeing an image internally is what consciousness is. Atoms are dependent things. Imagine one that is still, just floating in space. If it was hit by any other atom, it could potentially go in many different directions. When it's actually hit, it goes in one particular direction, and you take a picture of it, with its position in the image in a specific place. Since the atom is dependent, this image specifically came from the atom that hit it. If it was hit differently, the image would be different. In other words, you could imagine different images of the future that display the atom in different positions. And that image comes from whatever caused it to happen. Where does the image of something independent, like the first cause, come from? It can't come from something that came before, because there is no before. Therefore, the image from which creation occurred must have come from within the first cause itself. To have an image internally with an individual is precisely what consciousness is. To further support this case, other than matter and energy, there is also information. Some theories, such as it from bit, suggest that information may even be more fundamental than matter and energy. Whatever the case, there is certainly information in the universe, and if the universe was created by the first cause, then the information must have come from within it. This is effectively the same argument, but from a different perspective. Information within the first cause is the same as an image within it, which again suggests that it has the capacity to be aware of things and know them. Since the first cause is immaterial and must have free will and consciousness, it is only right to call him personal. Is he omniscient, omnipotent, and all-good, and therefore God? Since all information and all of creation came from the image within the first cause, and there was nothing prior to him, then he must be omniscient and omnipotent. Since the first cause has free will, it's only right to ask what is this will like, good or evil, or something else. This is actually a very difficult problem that would require a video of its own, as many people don't even believe in objective morality these days. The questions that should be asked are if there is such a thing as objective morality, and if there is, what is good and evil, and why? And then finally, we could ask if the first cause is good or evil, or something in between. Since I don't want to overshadow the entire video with what is effectively one of the greatest problems in philosophy, I will only give the most brief explanations and speedrun through the topic. Is morality subjective or objective? Morality is basically the categorization of actions into two distinct groups, good and evil. However, can my good and evil be different from yours? Let's assume that it's subjective to start with and see if we run into any logical contradictions. Pick any arbitrary action and define it as your greatest good, such as eating cake. What this means is that everything else will be a sacrifice in service of eating cakes, whether that's money, sleep, or selling your mother to get that sweet carrot cake. Whether you eat the cake or not, each one will have its own consequences, and here lies the problem. Reality is not a still picture, it includes time, and the consequences of your actions propagate into the future. The question then becomes, do the consequences of serving your greatest good serve it or harm it? We know very well what happens if you eat too much cake for a long time. Diabetes, many health problems, and if you go way overboard, an early death. The problem is, you can't continue to eat cakes when you're dead. What you defined as your greatest good now becomes your greatest evil by your own definition. This, however, is a contradiction in terms. The greatest good can't simultaneously be the greatest evil. This concept is true of all actions, as their consequences will ultimately either serve or harm your ability to continue doing the said acts. Thus, some things will become a positive feedback loop, like a good business that grows from its profits, and some things will become a negative feedback loop, like bad business that suffers losses and heads towards bankruptcy. The problem is time. Most subjective morality proponents only think of actions as a singular event, without taking time into consideration. And even if they do, they don't consider how the consequences feed back into the system. However, time is a part of reality, and conclusions should never be based on ignorance, so you can't just ignore time and consequences. Therefore, morality must be objective. What is good and what is evil then? Based on what I just said, self-propagating actions are good and self-defeating actions are evil by definition. Life, for example, is good as it's a self-propagating feedback loop. An important thing to note is that good and evil are not equal opposites. Good can exist on its own, but evil can only exist in the presence of something good. This is because you can't destroy something that doesn't exist. You cannot kill something that is not alive in the first place. This leads us to the last question: is the first cause good or evil? As evil cannot exist by itself, and the first cause must exist by itself, it cannot be evil. Also, the first cause is a creator, not a destroyer, and creation includes life that is a positive feedback loop that keeps growing, spreading and evolving. Therefore, the first cause must be good. Since the first cause is single and simple and perfect, he can't be partially good and partially evil either. He must be perfectly good and the source of all goodness in creation. So, is the first cause God? God is typically explained to be a personal, loving creator of everything. Because the first cause is single, simple, perfect, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, personal, omniscient, omnipotent, and the source of all goodness, the first cause is God. In summary, the first cause is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial, personal, omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good, and therefore God. Since we've gotten this far and established that the first cause is God with a consciousness and will, what could God possibly see and want if there was nothing prior to creation but himself? Also, if his will and consciousness are perfect, what's the difference between a perfect image of something and the thing itself? Let me know if you have an answer in the comments.